All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to LTC Heroes. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host. Today, I am at the Georgia Healthcare Association, and I'm honored to be joined today by the president and CEO, Tony Marshall. He's the president and CEO of Georgia Healthcare Association and the Georgia Center for Assisted Living. He's based in Stockbridge, Georgia. Tony, welcome to LTC Heroes.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Tony, you are the person responsible for why I'm here, because I wanted to meet your fabulous members and everyone in the association. We could talk about what's going on, and we will. And I want to talk about what's coming up with the association the next year in your leadership. But let's go back. I don't know, it's 5 years, maybe 10 years. I'm not going to say how old because I don't know. Tell me your initiation story and how you got into long-term care. Who was the person who brought you here?
Well, I have a unique story. I was very fortunate as a young child that my family introduced me to long-term care. My family volunteered, and our church spent a lot of time visiting with the local nursing centers at that time. As I developed in my career, I worked in public accounting and gravitated to healthcare finance, and had the opportunity to go to work with one of the large public accounting firms. And when I went to work there, their national director of long-term care approached me about joining that practice, and convinced me that I could have a nice future working in long-term care and finance in that direction. And he convinced me. Steve Martin, surprisingly, not the Steve Martin, but Steve Martin.
But just as important.
Just as important. Certainly for my career was important. And I had the opportunity to work with him for many years, both at the public accounting firm and then ultimately in a long-term care management practice where we managed over 15,000 beds. And that was really the start of my long-term care career. But I found it such an honor and an opportunity to go through working in finance, working ultimately with a management company, and then ultimately with associations for the last 25 nearly years.
You, according to Mindy, who's the person who put us in touch, you're a regulatory expert, you're a reimbursement expert, and I said, well, that's really intimidating. I don't know if I could balance my checkbook. How did you get your entryway into long-term care and become an expert in those two areas that are so critical for this industry?
Well, I think one of the really important steps was when I went to work for a regional hospital system in Virginia. That particular system had a hospital-based skilled nursing unit. And during my tenure there, we did a certificate of needs to develop a freestanding nursing center. And we purchased a college campus that we then converted to a CCRC. So we had a very wide range of long-term care options available in our acute care service practice. So that was my first introduction into long-term care. Clearly at that point, I was more of an acute care reimbursement and finance specialist, but had to develop those long-term care skill sets. And then when I went to work at Coopers and Library and went into their long-term care practice, I had the opportunity to work in multiple states and work in a practice of mainly financial consulting. When I went to work in a management company managing, as I said, around 15,000 beds, we were in 39 different states. And our company was unique. Instead of putting their reimbursement practice into their financial area, they merged it into their operational area. So our reimbursement team was tasked for establishing the financial operational budgets for our entire operational team. And so we were integrated in with the administrators and the regional directors, and were a part of the operations team and not the finance team, which allowed me to learn the regulatory side of things, to learn how to staff, to learn how to establish minutes per meal, hours of housekeeping, you will learn all of the parameters of operating your nursing center and not just the financial side.
What a unique story.
It really was a lot of fun. And initially, I thought it was going to be a very strange setup. But over time, when I was involved in all of the operational decision making and involved in the financial decision making, it really helps me through the years to understand when you make a decision, it's how it's going to not just impact the financial well-being of the organization, but how is it going to impact the caregivers that are there providing the care on a daily basis.
How did you take that know-how and then translate it over into advocacy at the association level and talk to politicians, advocate for our industry? Those are often two different skill sets, right? The numbers guy or the details guy, also talking to politicians, you have that personality.
Yeah, it, it was not something that was natural. I will tell you that I had to learn how to present in a way that people would understand. I was the type of person that some of my government relations team would say when they came into the room, it was like watching the Peanuts. It was just the wah, 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 wah. And that they helped me to understand if I could explain it in a way that they understood, that I could explain it in a way that a politician would. And so that's sort of, it was a learning curve. Uh, but it was a unique opportunity for me. One of my CPA clients that was doing work for our firm, our nursing homes, uh, asked me to consider coming to Florida Healthcare Association back in 1998. And I initially declined, but in 1999 the position became open again, and I made the decision to go to work there.
And what was the learning curve? Can you remember? Take me back to the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks and be like, oh, not only did I not know where this was, I didn't know how decisions were made. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know who was making decisions. Can you remember that learning curve?
I remember it very clearly because uh, I had a very good understanding of associations. I'd been an active member for multiple years. So I thought I understood what associations did. But I remember first walking into the job in Florida and walking into an empty office and being told you're now the reimbursement director, but not knowing what that entailed. And just thinking through the process and the way I allowed myself to work was to say, you need to do what you wanted done for you when you were in the practice on the nursing home side. So it allowed me to develop my position in a way that I thought would be most helpful for our members. The learning curve in working with legislators, uh, frankly, felt more natural. I just by nature enjoy talking to people, and I love our profession. I have a passion for it. And one of my former executive directors always said what he loved about me is my advocacy was as if I was always that owner. And I think that's allowed me, having been in those shoes, to know what's necessary. And I think that was easy to me because then I was just talking about what I loved.
I appreciate that insight. And when you first said that, you think what you wanted, you try to think like what you needed to get done beforehand. I wanted to applaud, but I knew that I was going to interrupt your thought process. So I really appreciate that. In terms of leadership, where do you want to take Georgia Healthcare Association? Like, what's your goal for 2022? Where do you want to be in 2023, and why?
We're very fortunate in Georgia that we have a very active membership. 96% of the nursing centers in Georgia are actually members of Georgia Healthcare. And our board of directors every 2 years goes through a strategic planning process, and they lay out the goals and objectives of the association. I think the biggest challenges we have are all directly COVID related at this point. So I think our biggest challenge over the next year to 2 years will be to help this profession to recover and to stabilize. I think we're in a unique position that financially there isn't a single entity that is not challenged in being able to meet the financial resources. The greatest struggle that we face is the ability to obtain and retain a qualified and sustained and stable workforce. And I think that trying to figure out the association's role in helping our members to create and sustain that workforce is going to be our greatest driver.
Oh, that's a great follow-up conversation. I think I'm going to have you back on in a week or two when we don't have the busy Expo to hear your opinion on that, and because I'm sure you're got your ears to the ground today and you're listening to unique solutions that you can learn from one and extrapolate it, put it at the associative level. Tony, and this might be a no answer, so feel free to tell me, Peter, you don't understand things. Were there any differences when you moved from Florida to Georgia? Are there any unique challenges in Georgia that you had to tackle? Are there unique advantages that you also had when you got to Georgia? And like, wow, this makes my job easy.
Surprisingly, that's a question I'm asked, okay. and it's actually a fairly easy answer. I will tell you, when I first moved to Georgia, it was a simple answer. It was, we have to do all of the same things we did in Florida with half the resources and half the number of centers. And so I have less than half of the staff. But then it became very clear to me that Georgia was very unique. While the resources are less, we have an ownership that is substantially more than, I won't say more than the people that were active, but a larger percentage of the members here are independent owners. And so what we do as an association is directly impacting them on a daily basis. So our members are engaged on a political level that is quite extraordinary. We do a level of education that I think exceeds probably every other state. And so what we do for our members on a daily basis in providing education is something that I walked into. I can't say I had a great hand in developing. It's sort of the culture of Georgia. So I think when you put those things together, for me, Georgia just fit that. Now, Florida is an amazing organization. And the people I worked with in Florida, I will never forget. And I worked there for 16 years. So it clearly was important. But leading this organization has just allowed me to be more fulfilled and to be able to work with a group of people that are just highly engaged.
When I realized trade shows were going to come back in person, December, January was highly likely. I started to reach out to leaders of long-term care all across my network, a lot on LinkedIn, and I said, do you go to trade shows? And if you go to it, is it worthwhile? And I think the number one reply that I got was from Georgia, and a lot of people said this association. So hats off to you. In terms of before you were in the leadership, can you think of something when you, as a member, that you learned and that you picked up on and you took advantage of from the association? Because I did get a small reply, maybe 5% of people saying, I don't go to trade shows anymore. I don't find associations that helpful. I want them to hear from you what you learned.
Well, as I said earlier, I was a very active member in multiple state associations. It's one of the unique things about my previous organization. They made the decision to allow all of their reimbursement team to become active participants in their associations. I have a saying with all of our members that one of the best ways you can measure the success of any organization is by looking at the active participation of its membership. If you have an active membership, an association is much more likely to be successful. And I think we are. As a member, I was an active member. I participated on committees, and I put myself in a position to learn what associations do. I think individuals that tend to have a negative opinion of associations have never allowed themselves to be a participant and fully understand all that's done. I think in Georgia, the fact that 96% of the nursing homes are members says that there is a value.
Yeah.
And that value has probably never been more evident than during the COVID timeframe. And we opened up our membership, our meetings for COVID to both members and non-members because we felt that we needed to be available to help the residents in Georgia. So we made a decision early on that all we provided from an informational standpoint, from the CDC, from CMS, we were going to make available to both members and non-members. And during that time, we saw our membership grow. And so I think for people that don't find the value, part of that challenge is we have to help them to find that value. So part of it's on us to help them to become more aware of what we do. But I think it's primarily from lack of knowledge, not from the lack of what we may be doing now.
Agreed. Tony, before we move into some rapid fire questions, more about your person and your background and maybe some lesser known facts about you, is there a friend, a mentor, a colleague here that you're really excited to sit down and have lunch with or give a hug to or hear them speak that says, oh man, I wanted to see them in the last year and I couldn't, and I'm going to see them today?
I wouldn't say there's anyone that I haven't seen. In the last several months, we've been able to make a lot of reconnections. We were able to have our summer convention at Amelia Island last year, which was the first big event that we were able to gather again. But I'm always excited. We sit down with our owner-operator group every year at convention, and it's a great opportunity to reconnect with what I consider, in many cases, to be the original founders of the organization, and then an opportunity to just be able to meet and talk with individuals who are leaders like Debbie Mead at the national level, Neil Pruitt, who is a past chair of American Healthcare, and to be able to just meet and have conversation beyond what we have on a daily or weekly basis. It's all work. Yeah. And to see people in a more relaxed setting.
I'm glad you mentioned Donna Mead. I'm going to interview her in a couple hours. I'm excited to hear her story and hear what she's doing. Lastly, the last question I'm going to ask you before we move on to the more entertaining questions, where I'll try and pin you down on something funny, is what's something you are really proud about, Tony, that you and your close knit have been in charge of in the last year? When you're proud, you might not say it in front of other people, but man, you go to bed at night and you think, man, I did this right.
Well, I think probably from an organizational standpoint, the thing that I am most pleased about that we don't just vocalize often is the level of support we've been able to provide to members during COVID. I think we've been able to provide tools through our weekly meetings with the members. We've averaged 250 to 300 participants in our weekly updates. And I'm just so proud of our team for joining together, whether we were able to be in the office together, which has been rare, or whether it's been by Zoom or webinar, and just be able to focus on prioritizing what we're doing on behalf of the members.
Fantastic. Are you ready to jump into some rapid fire questions?
I am.
Now, so the audience who might be watching now or watching it recorded doesn't know that I already have some insider information. Tony is a big Metallica fan and Virginia Tech fan, right? And we've already been talking about Metallica in South America. We've been talking about Cynthia symphony and orchestras. So some of these I will tease out as we go in right now. So I'm going to start off with the rapid fire, and let's do this one for you, Tony. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, get a message out to millions or billions of people, what would the billboard say and why?
Ooh, now that was hard. That one is a little bit unexpected.
Take your time.
I think when I think a little bit about where we are today as a country, I think my billboard would be fairly simple, and it would say something like, be kind.
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
Just be kind.
In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your professional life?
I think that I have always been an individual that is competitive. I always want to do things better than anyone else. I don't want to talk about doing things better, but I want to be better. And I think that competitiveness has allowed me to establish a level of drive in our team. And I think that competitiveness has often led to internalization and stress. And I think in the last several years, one of the things that I've realized that you work hard, you work really hard to achieve, but that you don't have to take it home with you, and you don't have to internalize it.
It's a great answer. The next question is, what bad recommendations do you hear in the long-term care industry? Bad recommendations you hear.
Well, I think the one thing that I very much get frustrated with is advocates that believe in order to be successful that they have to speak in a negative tone about long-term care. That I am often working with advocacy organizations and helping them to understand that they can be just as successful in praising the care that our caregivers provide and recognizing them as heroes as they can about denigrating them. So I think I recently heard an advocacy group speak about nursing centers that were providing poor care and feeding their residents pet food. And I asked where they got such a story. And it was from a story that was in the 1960s. And I did remind them that that was 60 years ago, and that the world of nursing centers and long-term care had changed dramatically in the last 60 years. And that it would be nice if they visited a home today.
Tony, well, real quickly, I just want to say thank you to Experience Care for sponsoring today's live, and most importantly, thank you to Tony Marshall and his team from Georgia Healthcare Association for inviting LTC Heroes to the winter convention and hopefully be here in the summer. To start to wrap it up, Tony, I want to know if you have a suggestion, a friend in long-term care who you think I should interview on LTC Heroes in the next month or two, who is not here at Georgia, maybe someone at the national level. I love your story. So if they think like you, they laugh like you, they're insightful like you, any recommendations?
Well, you talked about the people that got me involved. I should tell you, there's one particular individual that I worked with in Florida. He is the person that recruited me into the association world. And he was a former board member of the American Healthcare Association, and that's Joe Mitchell.
Joe Mitchell.
Joe was the CPA that I worked with when I was at Cooper's Library. He had his practice in Florida. He became an owner and operator in long-term care, and he was a great personal friend, but he was an individual that allowed me to see the value of working in long-term care, particularly in associations.
Fantastic. And the last one, and I just want the audience to know this because I like goofy curveballs and I think it makes life real. what is the album that you told me to look up on right before we hit record by Metallica that we should all go listen to?
It is a live album recorded with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, and the version I like, they've done two versions, is S&M 2.
That is fantastic. Tony, thank you so much for joining me at LTC Heroes. Thank you to Georgia Healthcare Association, and look forward to seeing you around the convention. So much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.